Good evening, and welcome to Environmental Coffee House, where we have a very interesting evening ahead of us. Yes, we do. And welcome to all of you on a Friday night. And I am your hostess, Sandra Shellis. And we have a couple of pretty good articles tonight. We're going to talk about violence, the earth. We're going to talk about humanity. We're going to talk about how humanity has been so vicious and awful, terrible. But first, we want everyone to understand that this is just theatrics. Theatrics, oh yes, theatrics. But isn't life theatrics? It's all theatrics. Well, as we are waiting for people to join, I do have a video I made for everybody, and welcome. Only 2 articles tonight. The first one is a serious one. Umair Haque, one of my favorites. And it's called What It Means to Live in an Abusive Society and Why We Do. And then we're going to jump over and we're going to think about societies throughout history, human societies throughout history. Have they always been like this? Have they always destroyed the earth? Have we always been the species of doom, so to speak? So good evening. And as people are joining us, we're going to queue up the video that I made. And I hope that you enjoy it. So here we go. Well, I certainly hope that primed you all up for tonight. Thanks to Key and Peele, and welcome all of you to a Friday night where we're going to go over an article first that I think is quite poignant, and I'm going to share it with you. Umair Haque, and I'm glad everybody's joining, and I really do hope you enjoyed that video. If you didn't watch it, please do so. I might put it up separately. So we're going to start with Umair Haque, and then we're going to end with an article called The 5 Most Terrifying Civilizations. The 5 in the history of the world. The 5. Okay, so we're going to do Umair first. Okay, so here we go. And let me just get to the sharing. And I am ready to go. Are you all ready to go? Okay. So what it means to live in an abusive society and why we do. And that's me. Probably once a day at least. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Here we go. There's a line I hear regularly that leaves me a little bereft. It goes like this: it's better than nothing. I wrote recently, for example, that Biden's infrastructure plan is not, as some are calling it, a New Deal, and how it needs to be much larger to make a dent in the problems America is facing. And again, I heard, as I do so often, many people saying it's better than nothing. That way of thinking, it reveals deep and true about the state of us. The state of us. It's not healthy logic for anyone to employ. It tells me our society is an abusive one, and it's left us thinking precisely like victims of abuse. How do victims of abuse think? They say exactly the same thing. It's better than nothing. What they mean is that, sure, the abuser might hurt them, physically, verbally, emotionally, but at least he, and it's usually a he rewards them afterwards with a little bit of affection, validation, closeness. Hence, it's better than nothing. Sure, I get abused, but I also get something I need. Something that feels like intimacy, love, care, nurturance. Only it isn't. It's a vicious cycle. And the more people allow themselves to fall into it, the more their self-worth erodes. It just erodes. But because pretty soon it's better than nothing becomes a justification for the abuser to do his absolute worst. You'll get some kind of meager, flimsy reward, but you'll suffer worse and worse punishments to obtain it. Hence, if you think about it a little carefully, it's better than nothing. It's logic that can justify any human atrocity from slavery to rape. And increasingly in our societies, disturbingly, it is. We settle for the slightly less bad instead of aspiring towards the genuinely best in us, in them, in anything anymore. Now, how does all this apply to our societies? How doesn't it, is the real question. If I asked you what a victim of abuse's life would look like in terms of hard outcomes, you might say something like this. They'd be depressed, maybe suicidal. They'd feel powerless and helpless. Their lives would go nowhere but down and backwards. They'd lash out in rage when they weren't escaping with some cheap thrill. And worst of all, they'd defend the very entities that had done all of that to them. They'd shrink and wither away as people, and it would be painful just to watch. And yet, all that's precisely what we see, too. When we look at our society, it looks exactly like a victim of prolonged, severe, sustained abuse. Suicide rates are skyrocketing, as are depression, anger, anxiety, just like if someone was in an emotionally abusive relationship. Mobility has declined to the point there's little chance of living a better life against, just like if someone was in an emotionally abusive relationship which sabotaged their opportunities. Social relationships have completely broken down. Young people are having less sex, and trust has imploded, just as in a socially abusive relationship where people grow isolated. Life expectancy is even falling, just like you might expect if someone was in a physically abusive relationship. I could go on, but the point is simple. There's no escaping the fact that we live in profoundly abused societies which neglect us, traumatize us, and scar us just for existing. Societies in which the kind of harm that would be regarded as severe abuse, if it happened in a relationship, is just the way things work. The societal, social contract, institutions, how we live. What else does it mean that life expectancy is falling, suicide is skyrocketing, opportunities are imploding, and hopelessness, anxiety, and despair are soaring? Societies are just organizations, much like families. And like a family can be an abusive set of relationships. So too can a society. Abusive relationships, well, they take people's responsibilities and possibilities away. Worse, they make people party to their own possibilities away by making them imagine, I'm not worth really caring for. I'm not worth really loving. I'm just an ugly, meaningless, hollow thing. I have no intrinsic value. This is the best I can get. This is the best I can get. Do you see how that logic mirrors exactly the line I hear? And you probably do too. It's better than nothing. Maybe you even think so yourself, but that's okay. I'm not judging or shaming or blaming you. I have nothing but empathy and love for you, but I do want us to gently try to see ourselves more clearly. What's the real challenge for victims of abuse? It's letting this false logic, this is the best I can get, go, and replacing it with a more mature logic of true self-worth. This is the minimum a healthy relationship consists of. Demands, needs. What is that minimum? It's something like a lack of abuse, for one thing. Someone who doesn't hurt you physically, emotionally, verbally, socially. That's the absolute bare minimum. But true minimum is something more like someone who generally considers you of being of intrinsic worth and helps you be your best self, who draws forth the best in you. There's a simpler way to put that. Someone who never, ever allows you to settle for whatever meager best you can get, but encourages and nourishes and supports you to become the best, truest, wholest you can be. That's what a healthy relationship is, isn't it? When I look at our societies carefully, they haven't made that psychological leap yet. Oh no, they don't hold their leaders to that standard. If they did, they wouldn't say, this is the best we can get, let's take it. They'd say, we deserve better than that threadbare best you're willing to give us. This is still an unhealthy relationship, maybe even an abusive one. The best you are willing to give us isn't good enough? Sorry. Abuse victims, though, they get trapped in these relationships. If only the human mind were wise enough to say, The best you could give me isn't good enough. Sorry. Every time someone was a victim of abuse. But it isn't. The human mind is a fragile thing that must be handled with delicacy and gentleness. People get trapped in abusive relationships precisely because their moral logic grows corroded. Their moral logic grows corroded. The more that they settle for the meager rewards they get and put up with the abuse, the more their self-worth erodes and the less they think of themselves as worth anything like genuine care or concern at all. Hey, he gives me the best I can get. How many abuse victims have spoken those words? What they really are saying is, that's all I'm really worth. I deserve to be punished and hurt and victimized. Maybe you feel that way because someone abandoned them. Or maybe they feel that way because someone abandoned them when they were young. Someone who should have cared for and betrayed them. You know, you can take that as an example. Or take me, as he says. I was viciously abused as a frail, sickly, stick-thin brown kid. And all my teachers, coaches, principals, they looked the other way when they weren't cheering it on. I think I'm better now. But it took a very, very long time for me to think of myself as someone who wasn't worthy of just the best they could get. Someone who had little intrinsic or inalienable worth. Those scars linger, my friends. To outgrow abuse is the project of a lifetime. Let me connect those dots. It's no surprise that so many of us think precisely like victims of abuse. That is what we are. We have lived in profoundly abusive societies our whole lives long. Societies which deny us the things we should consider basic human rights, like healthcare, retirement, savings, income, dignity, and instead pit us against one another in endless lethal combat for them. That is why our societies resemble severely abused people in terms of hard social outcomes. Hence, we've ended up like many abuse victims. We live in constant hope, not of a genuinely healthy relationship, but just of slightly less abuse or maybe just bigger rewards for the same level of abuse. We've come to think that we're not worth a generally nurturing, healthy society. The idea that a healthy society is one that provides a certain basic set of things to everyone, and that is absolute bare minimum of what a healthy society is, it seems totally beyond us. All we deserve is the best we can get. Oh my. The best we can get. We deserve better, my friends. We deserve better, my friends. Despite our mistakes and our failings, we deserve better, not just because we're productive or resilient or good, but simply because we are. Because every being does. Every being deserves to be free to live to its fullest possibilities. My puppy does. My favorite old tree does. The soil becoming the rain, becoming the sea, it does. And so do we. When we say this is the best we could get, we should examine ourselves. For those scars of abuse, I know so well. The feeling of inadequacy, worthlessness, estrangement, emptiness. The logic that a life of genuine happiness, meaning, purpose, fulfillment is something for other people, not for you. Not for us. We must just settle for the best that we can. Yep. We all deserve to be free to recognize ourselves. Sometimes, often, in fact, the best you can get isn't good enough to meet that bar. You are truly loved and seen and held by someone only when and if the bar is met. And remember that. Call it eudaimonia. Make it a rule for every relationship you have, whether personal or social. just might change your life. Now, I thought that was very apropos because that could be the earth, Gaia, what we've done to the earth, how we've treated each other. We've treated each other historically horrible, absolutely horrible throughout history. Examples after examples after examples. And I too have lived it and went back and lived it again. But you get to a point where you say, no more, no more. And that, my friends, is what the earth is doing. She's getting to a point where she's saying, no more, no more. She's not going to take any more. Humanity is giving her its last good try. She's not going to let it happen. She's not going to let them kill it. She's not going to let them kill us. Well, it is what it is. Had me thinking, abuse is like the middle name of humanity. And it's sad. We see the wars that are happening now. All over the world, there's some war or another, not just the Middle East. We are a warring motherfucking species. End of story. We are. But I digress. We can change ourselves, but that's all we can do. We can change ourselves, which is what I'm doing and which probably a lot of you are doing in life, right? Changing yourselves every day, working on yourselves. You're here. That's a good thing. You're here and you joined me to watch the choices I've made for us to ponder, right? I don't want to talk about one specific thing happening in this world. We know what the overarching deal is. And if that sounds doomorous, well, it's doomorous. Amorous. Doomorous. It is. It is, my friends. It is. So now that I've totally depressed you, totally given you something to think about in this, I'm going to change gears. I'm switching gears, guys. And I'm going to go into the most terrifying civilizations ever. And here we go. We are going here. And this is, well, here we go. They say, and enjoy this as I get my drink of water. They say that those who ignore history are doomed to repeat it. So pay attention, for Christ's sake. It turns out that many of our ancestors achieved levels of violence that take them right out of the realm of badass and into the less cool area of ball shriveling atrocity. Hang on to your balls, guys. These are civilizations you don't want to face during, say, your next time travel adventure. And yes, the Spartans are down there. So here we go. Number 5, the Celts. History is kind of spotty on the Celts because they never wrote anything down. And many of them, the witnesses died brutally. But what facts survived confirm one thing. They had gigantic Celtic balls. They they did. First of all, they had a thing for severed heads. After a long and trying battle, they'd all unwind at the end of the day by collecting a few souvenir heads. They'd bring them home and decorate the house with them. So the average cell home probably looked like a hunter's trophy room, crossed with the scene at the end of Halloween when all of the mutilated bodies started popping up around every corner. Sweet dreams, kids, sweet dreams. If they felt that yours was a head of particular importance, they'd embalm it. They would embalm it and whip it out at parties to brag about how awesome they were. When they were alone, they'd probably wiggle your jaw around and pretend you were complimenting them. The reason for all these head chopping good times was what the Celts believed, that the head held the soul. And so if you cut a dead guy's head off before all of that juicy soul leaked out of it, it was yours. A finders keepers sort of deal, you might say. So were they really so bad? Were they really so bad? Hey, remember Braveheart and how batshit insane Wallace's army looked with their faces painted blue? Well, the Celts would sometimes paint themselves blue and fight completely naked. Just because one would assume that fighting in the nude would present some rather sensitive targets to one's enemies. Now, we're talking about, they're nuts. But it seems that the Celts were so friggin' manly that they just didn't care. It was the ultimate insult. I'm not afraid of you, and to prove it, I have just laid my dong on your sword. The Aztecs. You remember Temple of Doom and how that unfortunate gentleman had his heart ripped out right before they dropped him down the lava hole. Well, picture lots of that, only this time Mom isn't around to turn the VCR off and stop your crying. That's the Aztecs. The Aztecs believed that for every 52 years that passed, the world would end unless the gods were strong enough. And that is common knowledge. The best way to toughen up a god is with a steady stream of constant human sacrifice, along with a dash of cannibalism, just for good measure. Most of the sacrificing went towards keeping their sun god happy, and it took place on top of a giant pyramid, so at least the view was probably pretty good. They'd hold you down, saw through your ribs, and take out your heart, which was still likely beating. Then, as if things couldn't get any worse, they throw you down a staircase. Were they really so bad? Yes, they were. Oh, yeah. Did we mention the cannibalism? After they removed your heart and threw you down the stairs, they'd eat your arms and thighs and whatever other bits looked tasty. The nuts, well, we really don't know if they liked them. We don't know. Some historians think that nourishment was the main reason behind all this willy-nilly human sacrifice, as the Aztecs had no domesticated animals to slaughter, and as much as, their diet was low in fat and animal stuff. So you know how it is if you've ever had a roommate try a vegetarian diet. It's just a matter of time until you start waking up with teeth marks on your extremities. And it's not even the bad part. The Aztecs held themselves to a high standard, and for every situation they asked, could we make this more gut-wrenchingly gruesome? So, for instance, during that sacrifice to the fire god, a newlywed couple would be tossed into, you guessed it, a fire. Then, right before they finally died from their horrendous burns, they drag them out, flesh still smoking, and dig out their hearts. Wait! It gets better! There was the offering to the earth goddess, which involved a young woman's skin being removed and worn around like Silence of the Lambs style serial killer flesh suit. On one hand, you might ask why none of the Aztecs thought this was odd. On the other hand, if somebody had an objection to the ceremonies, we're guessing they kept that shit to themselves. Oh, yeah. Now come the Assyrians. The thing about them, the Assyrians, is that they were basically the ancient Mesopotamian equivalent to that lovable team of underdogs in every sport movie. They had a lot of spunk and can-do attitude. You know, they had a can-do attitude. But try as they might, they just couldn't seem to make it into the big leagues. So luckily for them, and unlucky for everyone else, just as lovable that the lovable sports teams will sooner or later stumble upon a secret weapon, a magic dog with an unusual aptitude for kicking field goals, or perhaps after a couple of 100 years of being constantly harassed by more powerful nations, the Assyrians came across their own secret weapon, and it wasn't Emilio Estevez. This was written in 2009, hence the Emilio Estevez reference. It was iron. The Assyrians were the first people to start using iron weapons instead of bronze, which, to put that in a modern perspective, is sort of like showing up for a knife fight with the Death Star. Using iron made the Assyrians so near invincible, really, the other guys might as well have been swinging around bananas. So were they really so bad? Well, in a word, yes. Here's a cheery little quote from King Ashur-Nasbral, who spent much of his spare time baking cherry pies for the homeless and teaching the neighborhoods how to correctly adjust their bike helmets. I built a pillar against this city gate, and I flayed all the chief men who had revolted, and I covered the pillar with their skins, and some I walled up within that pillar, some I impaled upon the pillar on stakes, and others I bound to stakes round about the pillar. Many within the border of my own land I flayed, and I spread their skins upon the walls. I cut off the limbs of the officers, of the royal officers who had rebelled. Not nice. Just humans. Oh, yeah. From the beginning to the very end. Ever have one of those days when you just wanted to get out of the house and just flay someone? Yep, you're probably a psychopath. Sure, we understand that intimidation was how invading armies ended wars before they started. That kind of psychological warfare was crucial for a conquering army. But reading that up there, we're pretty sure Assyrians, they just enjoyed it. They just enjoyed it. The Spartans. Oh boy. All it took was one movie, and now everybody knows that the ancient Spartans weren't the kind of guys you'd want to invite to your fancy cheese tasting party. Oh no. They'd probably stumble in and mock you for not being a full-time member of the military. And then they'll impale all your guests with spears. Not to mention they'd eat all your fancy cheeses. And you know what? It wasn't just a movie. The thing at the beginning of 300 where they toss all the imperfect babies off the cliff, letting them splatter on the rocks below. You know what? They really did that. But first, they would bathe the newborn in wine to see if it was strong enough to survive. That's right. Being a Spartan meant you had to handle your damn liquor right out of the damn womb. So, were they really that bad? Were they really that bad, they ask. Every single Spartan male was a soldier. Every other job was done by slaves. The Spartan men were warriors, and that was that. They fought until they could finally retire at the age of 60, which is about the equivalent of living to about 400 years old today. Of course, if you lived to be that ripe old age, you were a good father and scholar and all around great guy. Too bad. You didn't even get a headstone when you died. You didn't deserve it. The only Spartans who got marked headstones were the ones who died in battle during victory. Think you're a war hero? Well, if you're still alive, that meant you still weren't hero enough for Sparta. So, and if you lost your shield during the battle, you got the death penalty, dudes. A true soldier would have gone back to get it or died trying. If we, or the movie, make them sound like heroes, well, you don't have to know about those those slaves were mentioned earlier. The Spartans beat their slaves by law. We don't mean the law allowed them to beat the slaves. We mean that the law required it. Things could get a lot worse for slaves. As sort of a coming-of-age holiday, there was an occasion every year upon which the young Spartan men were encouraged to sneak around and murder as many slaves as they could without having to feel bad about it. If you didn't murder anybody, they'd probably call you gay. Now, last but not least, the Mongols. There was a motorcycle club named the Mongols. Okay, here's the thing with the Mongols. See the stadium? That's 10,000 people in there, okay? Now, imagine 400 of those stadiums, each full of people. Now, imagine every single one of those people with grotesque stab wounds. That's right. It is estimated that the Mongols, under Genghis Khan and others, killed 40 million people. 40 million people with swords. With swords. The Mongols ripped through the world like a lawnmower. They were an army of Batman villains, only Asian on a horseback. When the Mongols got in a conquesty mood, if your town happened to be in the way, you were, as they say, shit out of luck. The Mongols would give you two choices, both of which thoroughly sucked. The first and most practical was to surrender and let them take whatever they wanted, which was pretty much everything, likely including your livelihood and all the women folk. The second choice was not to surrender and thus promptly watch your town burn to the ground and your fields salted. Then just add another scoop of crap to an already crappy day, you'd be brutally murdered. Oh, lovely. So, were they really that bad? During an invasion of India, a Mongolian general built a pyramid in front of the walls of Delhi out of human heads. Are you picturing this, guys? If so, are you picturing like 24 heads there? Because this guy, he used 90,000 of them. They, like the Celts, had a thing for severed heads. They liked to gather them up and catapult them inside the enemy's compound. They would also fling corpses infected with the Black Death. And when they ran across pregnant women, they did things we won't discuss here. When you saw them coming, hey, you could shoot at them with your arrows and spears all you wanted. All you'd be doing is slaughtering the huge crowd of refugees the Mongols forced to march ahead of them as human shields. So yeah, you know why the Spartans had to settle for number 2. Well, that's fucking why. So there you have it. Tonight's discussion on humanity. And you can extrapolate what humans do to each other to what we are doing to the planet. Basically, We are splaying and flaying and burning and killing and maiming each other and the planet. And if you think it's going to stop, I hate to be macabre, but it isn't. Hoople's cat asked me which one I would be in. Take a guess. Take a guess. I don't know if I could be in any one of them. Nah. They're too hideous, too horrible. But yet, when you're living in those societies, what is it? When in Rome, do as the Romans do. So I don't have to go much farther. I really don't. We all know. We know the truth. We've seen what's happened. You know any bit of your history, you understand it. Oh yeah, there's great, there's good, there's beautiful people. A lot of you right here, beautiful people. But when you read history, it's not so beautiful. It's not a very nice place to be. And now we've destroyed it. And what are we, 3% of natural lands left? Mike says, I forgot the Vikings. I forgot the Vikings. I'll tell you, I think I scared a lot of people away tonight. Spartan civilizations were outnumbered 3-1 by slaves, and that's why they killed them twice a year. That's pretty awful, isn't it? But this is it. Let's see, the Aztecs, they fed millions and had a rich culture. Spartans protected the cradle of Western civilization. Well, of course, the article I just read you was supposed to be satire for a Friday night that I thought was fitting for the occasion. Yes, it's not always easy to depress a bunch of people, but I made it so tonight. True doomers are not afraid. No, we are not afraid. We step forward. We are a witness. We see what's happening. So there you go. Everybody have a good night. It's like the Rocky Paw. Yeah, we live in it. We live in it. Osama. When asked what he thought about Western civilization, Gandhi replied, I think it would be a very good idea. Oh my God. No, I didn't, Void. He asked if I used to smoke. Nope, not cigarettes. Nope, never was a cigarette smoker. I think about 5 minutes of my life. So I'm not depressed. See, that's the thing. I'm not depressed and I'm not sad. As long as I have my planting, and you guys, your things like in Hoople's cat and channels, we're okay. Oh, good night. My cat's just passed. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, new rescue. So for that sadness, your daughters are getting new. That's cool. That's cool. Well, guys, I really hope you enjoyed the selections tonight. It's kind of like a macabre Friday night. Just sometimes you get that way. The news is not good. The news is like a macabre thing itself. And because I don't want to read the news. And besides, Reagan Parrington did that today. In his own special way. Well, Billy Joe's Mo. Actually, the Mongols would get be better for masters than the ones that were in power before they made sure of it. Oh, I bet the history, that it's a lot to go into. But anyway, thank you guys very much for being with me tonight and watching my video, listening to the choices. I decided that this was the mood, dark, because nothing's light. Not when you look at the media. Nothing's light. Ooh. Okay. Dee Dee has an idea about next Friday night. Sounds like a plan, Dee Dee. Sounds like a plan. All right. Hey, Chuck. Chuck, the best mod on another channel in the world. He's competing with Kim here. Anyway, I guess what I'm going to do is I just wanted to entertain you with a little bit of the darker side of things. And Umair wrote a dark article. And it brought out some truths and some painful truths for those of us who have been in abusive relationships. But it's akin to me, to the earth and what she's been through. Good night, my friends. Thank you for coming. I think what I'm going to do is ask you to check out or buy me a coffee and become a member. And I'm going to bid you adieu.